But as with child abuse or spousal abuse, there really is no excuse for
That's right.
acting out and doing something that most people would recognize as being not right.
Welcome to Aging Vibrantly, Conversations to Empower Seniors, an Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario podcast. I'm Rayanne Rideout, the host of the show, where we amplify the voices of seniors who impart their expertise and wisdom to enhance our understanding of aging issues and ways of living a safe and fulfilling life with respect and dignity. Every person, no matter what their age, deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. However, a startling fact is that 1 in 10 older adults 65 years of age and older experience elder abuse in Canada. Despite this being a very real health and social justice issue, it often isn't talked about, but we are here to change that. In today's episode, Elder Abuse, How to Recognize and Prevent, we're going to shine a spotlight on this issue. But before we jump in, I want to introduce my co-host today, Pauline Leaning, who is a member of our podcast Senior Advisory Committee. Pauline has been very active for the past 7 years, chairing the Prevention of Elder Abuse Network of Simcoe County, and just recently stepped down from this role. She previously worked for 35 years with the Ontario government under the Ontario Ministry of Community and Social Services, and was also employed for 15 years in community services with the municipal government. It is a pleasure to have you alongside today. I know you're going to have some dynamic questions for our guest speaker and how we can prevent elder abuse to secure the safety and well-being of older adults. So without further delay, I want to introduce our guest. She's a pioneer in the work of elder abuse prevention, Dr. Gloria Gutman. Gloria is a professor emeritus in the gerontology department and the research associate in the Gerontology Research Center at Simon Fraser University, having founded and both directed from 1980 to 2005. As a gerontologist, Gloria's research interests are wide-ranging, including seniors housing, dementia care, and of course, elder abuse prevention and neglect. She's a distinguished academic researcher and an author of 23 books, including Aging, Ageism, and Abuse, Moving from Awareness to Action. During her career, Dr. Gutman has had a number of high-profile roles, including the immediate past president of the International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, and she currently sits as a board member at the Seniors First BC and the BC Association of Community Response Networks. Her long-standing work and achievements have been recognized provincially, nationally, and internationally. These accolades include the prestigious Rosalie Wolfe, a Memorial Award, the Order of British Columbia, and the Order of Canada. Gloria, we are so honored to have you join us to share your knowledge, your insights, and research on elder abuse prevention. So Pauline and I have been really looking forward to having this interview with you. I know my colleague knows your work well and has listened to some of your webinars. So we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, as you can see from your long list of work that you've been doing in elder abuse, to share and just take time to talk to our listeners today to give them a better understanding about what elder abuse is. So let's just start with the basics, maybe about how do we define, or what is elder abuse? Like, when people hear about the word, what does that mean to people?
Well, internationally, there are 5 types that are recognized: physical abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, as well as neglect. In some jurisdictions, including British Columbia, they also include self-neglect. And these are fairly obvious when we're talking about them. If somebody pushes you or shoves you or burns you or cuts you, that's obviously physical abuse. The psychological abuse is where a person is really made to feel that they're not welcome, that they're not in with it. It's not just an insult now and again. All of us at some point, somebody, doesn't like us and says something nasty. But it's a situation where it's chronic and where it's happening a lot. And, a key defining characteristic of elder abuse is a situation where there's an expectation of trust. So whether you're in an institutional setting or you're at home, or in a situation where you're out in the community and you're with somebody, your lawyer, your doctor, where you expect that they're going to treat you with respect and that they're trustworthy, where that's not occurring.
Right. And which form of abuse do you think are we witnessing, or are we getting evidence that happens most often in older adults in Canada?
Well, in Canada and worldwide, really, the most common is psychological abuse, and followed by, I would say, with financial abuse. And we're seeing that in more and more different modern forms that are coming at us over the internet or by the phone or by somebody coming to the door and making it sound like they're doing something for us that in fact is not in our best interest.
And it must be hard. I mean, we talk about emotional abuse, and some of those signs are very subtle, right? In terms of, it's easy to hide some of those actions that if someone's yelling at you or degrading you and not treating you nicely. Sometimes we don't see that unless someone may disclose or we actually witness it, because they may have some signs of maybe some depression. But is that why we don't maybe hear a lot about emotional abuse versus, I know in our work we hear a lot about financial abuse often?
Well, with the emotional abuse, in some cases, it's something that the person has lived with for a long time. So it could be spousal abuse that has just simply escalated or gone on over the lifespan or the time you've lived with a particular person, or your child could be rude and nasty. And it's really hard to admit to yourself that you raised this rotten kid who's not being nice to you.
That's true.
Is that who does the abuse most often is an adult kid or an adult grandchild?
Well, most often it's a person that's living with you. So it could be your spouse, it could be your child, it could be somebody who is living in your particular residence looking after you. So, you need to take into consideration where the person is living, with whom they're living, and as well as relationships.
Right. Yes. Often it's those unhealthy relationships, I think, right, Pauline, that we hear a lot about. Right. Is, somebody moves in and they think it goes okay, and all of a sudden the relationship changes or shifts somehow, and then it continues on, and that person then maybe continues to live in isolation and experiences some loneliness and may not sort of reach out to help. I guess the last question, just before we go forward in terms of getting more in depth about the issue, is there an age group of that this happens to most often? We use the word elder abuse, and sometimes there's different terminologies for that, but is there a certain age group that is more vulnerable or that this is alluding to versus younger individuals? Like, has that been researched in your experience?
Well, we do know that when there is a caregiving situation, that can be very stressful. And particularly if the person that you're looking after is dementing or has cognitive impairment. And so the person that's looking after them maybe sort of get to their wits' end, and they don't mean to be nasty, but it happens. So people that are physically or mentally impaired and dependent on another person are at greater risk than those who are, strong and independent and able to do what they want to do most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How prevalent is elder abuse in Canada?
Well, as Rayanne said, we're looking at probably 1 in 10. So that's a lot of people.
It is. And how did the pandemic affect all of this abuse? Did it worsen?
Well, it's really hard to tell because the kinds of statistics you look at would be agency statistics in particular. So like in Vancouver, there's the seniors elder abuse of the awareness line,
Mm-hmm.
the acronym SAIL. And yeah, the figures may go up, but you have to look at, are all of those calls that are coming in actually abuse, or is it that people are calling in or called in during the pandemic because they had a situation that was difficult and they were isolated and lonely, or otherwise needed to talk to somebody?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you have to, and plus the situation was that during the pandemic, a number of these agencies were short-staffed. So it's, again, the numbers are hard to tell, but the fact remains that we know that both for younger people, for children, and for spouses, disaster situations do tend to
Yes.
add stress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
So,
people are now coming out of the pandemic and trying to put their life back together. So
yes. So has the incidence then, do you think it's decreased at all since the pandemic, or has it remained about the same? Or are we just hearing more about it?
well, I think we're hearing more about it, and we've had some campaigns that are raising awareness of information lines. And so, again, if the statistics go up, is it because people are now more aware of where they can get some help than
Yes.
they were before?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard to say. But still, that thinking about 1 in 10, if that's the average, and the World Health Organization has done a number of studies across countries, and that seems to be a figure that describes a number of different countries.
I think the other underlying causes that we hear, especially during the pandemic, was ageism. That was very prevalent in a lot of articles that came out in newspapers, and we see some of the reports that were coming to light in terms of older people being neglected and not at the top priority of some other individuals. So, does that still? I think that we still see ageism as a huge problem. We talked our first podcast with with Ashton Applewhite, and that's what she was. It is a significant problem. So not only within our society how we treat older adults, but our priorities and policies and in integrating to make sure that we do look after older adults. So do you think that played a role and is changing now since the pandemic?
Well, ageism is unfortunately alive and well. So it's one of the few isms that all of us, if we live long enough, could well experience. And but ageism and abuse are two different things.
Yeah.
In the sense that abuse is taking it up quite a few more notches. And again, there's that critical thing to think about, which is the expectation of trust. So as opposed to garden variety discrimination or garden variety, I don't think old people are as smart as some of the young people, that kind of thinking. That's different than a situation where a person is really having their life undermined by somebody else who's in a position of power.
it's sort of an underlying root cause of abuse, and people don't respect and care, then they continue on with their abusive actions and behaviors, and it becomes tolerated, if you want to say, by others, by the person themselves, because they may not know how to reach out for help, or people around them because they think that is, quote, normal, when in fact it's not. So those you mentioned about those who are vulnerable to abuse, just previously. So maybe you can give our listeners a little bit of idea, like who is really most vulnerable to experience of abuse. Is there certain cultures or different communities, individuals with that we should be paying more attention to or reaching out to help and do better support to?
Well, the research that I've been doing most recently, using data from the Canadian Longitudinal Study on Aging, looks at elder abuse in 4 different groups. So we compare men and women, heterosexual men and heterosexual women, and we also look at people who are in the LGBT community. And for what our data is showing is that when it comes to psychological and to financial abuse, the group that is most at risk are lesbian and bisexual women, and followed by depending on the type of abuse, the other members of the LGBT community. But clearly, physical abuse is more common amongst gay men than it is with heterosexual men or with women. And,
interesting. And
well, we tend to think about elder abuse as being a woman's issue. And I know I have colleagues at UBC and at Simon Fraser who recently were quoted in an article in the Vancouver Sun saying that we don't want to think about or recognize that men may also be abused, and they may be abused by a same-sex partner or by the opposite sex partner. Mm-hmm. So it's a smaller group, but still abuse is something that both men and women, or anyone that defines themselves in between those 2 poles,
yes,
as they can be victimized.
And it's very empowering, I think, when we support each other, and give voice to each other and validate that, the experiences that people have and trauma, and to reach out and support each other, but also maybe other services that can help them and stay strong. I think that's so important, because we know that isolation is a really good key factor, and abuse as well. So if people can get in groups and informal or formal to support one another, I think that is also helpful. Gloria, what about individuals with maybe some disabilities and cognitive impairments? We work often with the Alzheimer's Society here in Ontario and elsewhere, and we find and the calls that we do get, individuals are vulnerable to abuse. And have you done any research or found any more information that touches on that issue?
Well, mine specifically has not dealt with that particular issue, but any of us who are have been the primary caregiver of an older person, and particularly one who is cognitively impaired, can recognize a situation where you may get nasty, and so caregivers need to protect themselves, get some rest, get some respite, get some help if they feel like they're getting to the point where they're not acting in the best interest of the person that they're looking after.
Yeah, and we try to, for those who are there doing caregiving is to reach out for support if you find that you're acting in behaviors that's not normal and you are stressed out, because there are services there, and we would encourage people to do that, because sometimes people, it's unintentional, and like you saying, it's could be stress related and not, services may not be available or wait lists. So it's important to reach out for assistance when we do find that we just don't know what else to do, and not the coping strategies and mechanisms may not be in place, but there are good organizations that can help people through those difficult processes. Yeah.
But as with child abuse or spousal abuse, there really is no excuse for
That's right.
acting out and doing something that most people would recognize as being not right.
That's right.
There actually is a program in British Columbia that's offered by the BC Community Response Networks that's called It's Not Right. And so that's something that people may want to access, and because it illustrates sort of the situations where anybody or any of us looking at that situation would say, this is something out of whack with this situation, and somebody needs to do something about it.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because we just recorded a podcast on that program, and I know Pauline is a trainer on the It's Not Right Neighbors, Friends and Families as well. So so thank you for bringing that up, because it is a great program and people can look at that.
I've done over 100 presentations of It's Not Right, and I'll tell you, every time I do it, I learn something new, because the people who are, in the audience, so to speak, have such interesting things to say and have new things to bring up that we had not even heard of before. So it really is good. It's a good illustration. But moving on from that, Gloria, what would you recommend to anybody listening today that what should they do if they suspect that somebody is vulnerable or experiencing abuse? What should they do?
Well, there's a couple of resources. Certainly, we've got the Canadian Network for Prevention of Elder Abuse.
Yes,
it's a national resource. You can find it on your computer, and it gives some information by province as to where you can get help. So, like in my province in BC, there are designated agencies with it, and in particular within each of our health regions. And so, you can find phone numbers, you can find key people to contact. There are also are groups across the country, like IPO, and that are specialized in responding and in connecting. So they don't do direct service, but they will link you with key people who do have the skills. Because this is a touchy situation, especially if you're living with someone. You don't want to increase their risk by taking an action that's inappropriate. So you really need to get to somebody who knows how to handle these situations.
What about speaking to the older adult themselves? Would you recommend doing that, or how would you speak to them? It's a difficult conversation.
It's a very difficult conversation, and because if it would be hard as a person who is a victim to put the finger on somebody that is in a situation where they're living with them every day. They, could make them, put them in jeopardy. So, but still, we are talking adults. We're not talking about little kids. So a person does have a right to risk or to be at risk. So talking to them, you have to be very careful and if possible, direct them to where they might educate themselves.
Also, that creating that safe space, right, in terms of talking and, like you say, using the "It's Not Right" program around just approaching someone in a safe space that maybe not being anybody around, and just say, I noticed, your son was in the driveway the other day and you were yelling at you, just wondering if everything's okay, if you wanted to talk about something, and sort of leave it to them if they're capable, and making sure their safety is, not at, significant risk. And like you say, referring them to someone is so important. And, supporting them along that journey of however that looks for them, I think is so vital as well, as you mentioned. And also there's 211 services, I know, in BC and here in Ontario that people can call to get referrals if they don't know where to look, if they don't have internet access or that kind of thing. That's kind of one of the helpful numbers that is out there as well, too.
Most of the libraries are pretty good, too, for information around this subject. Yeah. Gloria, could you speak to any campaigns that have been effective in raising awareness of elder abuse and educating the public? I'm thinking sort of WeAd and other things like that.
Yeah, well, World Elder Abuse Awareness Day is June 15 every year.
Yes.
And I think it has been quite successful internationally in drawing attention to issues of and situations where older people are being neglected or are being abused, and where their safety is at risk.
And you were a pioneer in that work, weren't you, Gloria, with Dr. Elizabeth Podnick's?
The actual history, which most people do not realize, is how this came about was one morning I got a call at 6 o'clock in the morning, my time, from Elizabeth Podnick's, who was a pioneer in doing elder abuse research in Canada. And she phoned me up and she said, well, Gloria, I think we should have a World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And I thought, there's all kinds of awareness days of other types. So Elizabeth and I took it back to the International Network for Prevention of Elder Abuse and convinced them that we should talk with Alex Kalachi, who at the time was leading the section on aging within the World Health Organization. And Alex thought it was a good idea, and he actually identified June 15 as the date. So we then moved forward, and it took a number of years before the UN officially recognized it. But this was made in Canada.
That's right. Yeah,
that's wonderful. Oh, I didn't know it was made in Canada. I didn't know that. I just, we do it every year. We have celebrations all over the place, and my network does a lot of work on that day, trying to raise awareness. We have flag raisings, and we have some of our churches and city halls light up purple, and we encourage everybody to wear purple and just celebrate seniors and what they've accomplished and their wisdom and their history and everything, and try to increase the respect that people should have for them.
Right. And Pauline's done a great job, and some of the other networks across, not only within Ontario, but across Canada, of engaging, leaders, municipal leaders and other MPs, MPPs to get engaged in these flag raising ceremonies. I've seen pictures of Pauline, and it's great because we increase that awareness and engagement across all sectors and jurisdictions. So we thank you for your leadership in that, Gloria.
Yes,
because,
absolutely.
You'd be commended for, starting that, because the uptake is across the world, as we can all witness during that. It was so much on social media that if anybody, our listeners are, pay attention and get engaged in those activities, which leads me to sort of our close to our final questions about how do we leave our listeners with actions about how they themselves can increase their own awareness and support older adults that they might be supporting, or neighbors. Like what actions can they do to increase their own awareness?
Well, I think that really to think about themselves, what respect they have for themselves, because sometimes people believe the stereotypes, um, not just about other older people, but about themselves. That somehow, when you grow old, you lose the ability to speak up for yourself, or you lose the ability to look after your basic needs, or to express your opinions. And so, this takes us back, I think, to the ageism piece
Yes.
of recognizing that all of us at any age need to be treated with respect and dignity. Unless we, if we're doing something that's dumb or that's nasty, then we need to stop ourselves, or whoever is in our orbit and who we interact with should say, look, that's not what you're doing, or what you're saying is not right. And
Yeah, I like that advice in terms of like, telling people to, be empowered to speak up against, speak up when things aren't right, and, empower people to know what their rights are too, right? Like, as you were saying, is, because often it's, you think something slides by, but if we keep letting it go and let it go, it just keeps, escalating and gets worse. So, yeah, that's good information to let people know.
yeah. So, and, when we first started to think about elder abuse, it was talked about as it was a social problem. Then it became a health problem. Now it's recognized as well as a human rights issue, and that we have a right to be able to live in a situation where we feel safe and comfortable.
Yep. We're moving towards that convention, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But also, I would say to older people, speak up for yourselves, stand up for your rights, and interact with other people. During COVID, many of us experienced social isolation.
Yes.
And we had to stay home and minimize the number of people we were in contact with face to face. On the one hand, that did have some benefits. During that period of confinement, I didn't have any colds, no flu. I wasn't exposed to infectious disease from little kids with runny noses. But on the other hand, if you're socially isolated, you may not be as much at risk of physical abuse or psychological abuse, but you sure can be at risk of financial abuse. And somebody telling you that they've got some product that will keep you safe, or that if you invest your money with them, they will give you some income that is beyond what you ever thought. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as older people, we need to be on guard and not be suckers for somebody taking advantage of us.
That's true.
And there are some people who are mean and nasty and who will take advantage of
That's right.
somebody that they think is vulnerable. So we have to be strong and stand up for our rights and get back out into the community.
Excellent. I think you've just about answered our last question, Gloria, which is one we ask everybody on who's come onto our podcast, and that is, what advice would you give to empower people to age vibrantly?
I think you covered
and
that.
I think you've just said that. Stand up for your rights, be strong,
Yeah, stand up for your rights, be strong, get out of your house and get into your community. Older people are a tremendous resource that often is untapped. And so, we know that there are people that are giving endless hours as volunteers to their community, but they also benefit. So it's good for yourself as well as for the recipient of your activities. So
That's awesome.
Absolutely right. Absolutely.
and support each other. Look, if some of your friends are deceased, find new ones. Life can be very interesting if you open yourself to it, and you don't wait for somebody to give you an invitation on a silver platter. There's lots of activities out there, lots of ones that are free. Get in touch with your local community center, your neighborhood house. Many of them have seniors programs.
That's
But
true.
only probably 10% of seniors take advantage of those programs.
That's true. But that's really good advice. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gloria. I want to, I can't thank you enough for coming
Really?
today and sharing your knowledge. The conversation has been really interesting, and we really appreciate all the leadership you have given to not only this area of your research and in your communities on elder use, but all the areas of aging that you have supported in terms of your work and your books and articles. Presentations, etc. I've had the privilege of working with you for many years, so it's nice to have this opportunity to have more of an informal kind of conversation about the work on elder abuse, and for the work you're also doing in raising awareness, not only for WEAD, but also your continued research. So thank you again for spending time with us today. Lastly, I challenge our listeners to learn more about elder abuse and to find local resources in your area. If you do suspect someone that may be harmed or vulnerable to abuse, you can call our organization at Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario, where we provide consultations and help navigate supports and services. Or visit our website at eapon.ca to find more resources on abuse prevention. If you do reside outside Ontario, as Gloria mentioned, you can visit the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse at cnpea.ca. They have a listing of contacts in each jurisdiction. Remember, people of all ages have the right to live with dignity and respect in a safe environment. For more information on elder abuse and to find links from today's episode, please see our show notes. Be sure to check out previous episodes on our YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your podcast. Don't forget, if you enjoyed our Aging Vibrantly podcast, the best way to show your support and to help us to grow is to subscribe, like, share, leave us a rating, and leave us a review. The podcast is funded by the Government of Canada's New Horizons for Seniors program and produced by Todd Miller of the Podcast Experts with the support of Lisa Whitfield, our project coordinator. Until next time, stay vibrant.